Welcome to 10 Minute Magic, a bi-weekly format covering news in the world of Magic the Gathering in 10 minutes or less. I am Joseph Dunlap.
And I am Ben Cotty. And this is what's going on in Magic the Gathering this week. Pro Tour Sydney, visa application mess. On the 29th of June, Wizards Premier Play contacted players who had qualified for Pro Tour Sydney to inform them that they now had to apply for a visa to allow them to travel to Australia. It seems that despite Wizards of the Coast's initial investigation and queries to the Australian authorities, the said Australian authorities only now have informed Wizards that their event would require a pseudo-work visa rather than a normal tourist one. This is much more difficult to obtain, requires some additional cost, approximately $150, and no amount of time and effort to complete some online forms. It also requires an invite letter from Wizards of the Coast. Unsurprisingly, there was a lot of uproar this close to the Pro Tour, which is 4 to 6 weeks depending on when you want it to actually arrive in Australia, and the normal application process for the visa required would usually take around the same amount of time. 6 weeks is the sort of given amount on the Australian visa pages. Off the back of this, many players have decided to delay their invites until the next Pro Tour rather than risk not being able to arrive in time or to have to go through all the hassle. They can do this if they're sort of new first-time players. However, those that are chasing platinum, gold, or any of the other things that would normally be chased at the back end of the season really just have to try and attend this Pro Tour. There was the normal criticisms levied at Helene Bergeau and her team, but this one at least appears to have been reasonably out of their control. They did the due diligence up front, and they've worked now super hard to try and make sure that those wanting to go can do so. Any risk to the Pro Tour is obviously very damaging to Wizards of the Coast and the game. The good news is that a number of players, including Eric Froelich and Paul Rietzel, have tweeted that their visa applications have now been accepted, so hopefully this is all sorted in good time, although there will have been some casualties of players already choosing not to attend their first Pro Tour. Helene has communicated they are extremely unlikely to return to a Pro Tour in Australia following all of this, but the GPs in the country will be safe as they're predominantly aimed at the local players.
Many players have been tweeting that they have finally received their visa, which many of them were very, very nervous about, and it's quite unfortunate that you require the invite letter because not everyone has their invite letter yet. GP Master Race down to the final event. A couple of weeks ago, we updated you on the extremely tight race for the GP Master Race, which grants a seat at the World Championships. With one more event to go, Grand Prix Sydney, the field has cleared to a 2-horse race. Brian Bronduin at 53 points is 1 point ahead of Tomohiro Saito, 52 points, with Seth Manfield and Reed Duke 4 points behind at 48. Meaning that both BBD and Saito have to perform very badly to let either of the other two in. BBD took the lead with a top 4 team limited appearance at GP Sao Paulo in Brazil. Interestingly, they conceded to their last round opponents in the Swiss to stop Saito's team from also making top 4. This is somewhat ironic, as BBD and his teammates were leading proponents of the get rid of concessions argument that was a topical debate in early 2016. Seth is guaranteed a spot at Worlds as defending champion, but if he won the Masters race, it would pass down to the at-large rather than second place. The other 3 are unlikely to qualify for Worlds without a Supreme PT Sydney, so the GP Master title is the aim.
Everybody thought it was close 2 weeks ago. It's even closer now, and there's just one more event to go. So this, one of these new items they put in to race for one of the world slots, seems to have really done its trick for these people at least, and it's been well publicized. I think it's been well highlighted in social media by Wizards. So yeah, it's definitely an exciting race to look forward to in that event. It's Emrakul. The plot twist that no one saw coming. Emrakul is the big bad of Eldritch Moon. Denizens have been transformed into Eldrazi horrors, with beings and even whole hamlets merged into one. Liliana has even been motivated to now belatedly join the Gatewatch, and she got her long-awaited Oath card. Spoiler warning on the story of the fight against Emrakul coming up, so please feel free to skip ahead to our review of the prominent Manaleak articles in approximately 30 seconds' time. A spoiler of what seems to have been from the Fat Pack inserts shows Liliana swearing her oath, and also gives some of the details of the still-to-be-released story. It tells of the Gatewatch's arrival and fight, and says that ultimately Emrakul is imprisoned, and that the 3 known Eldrazi have been taken care of. To me, this hints there are possibly more Eldrazi titans that lurk the blind eternities, or that maybe the ending of Kozilek and Ulamog was not the end of their story. We know that Tatamio survives, but she declines to join the Gatewatch as fighting really isn't her thing.
Interestingly enough, she's going to see plenty of fights before she rotates, and possibly even in Modern.
Yeah, and I know I'm going to have fun with her in Cube.
So we move on now to reserve list buyouts. First, an individual bought out Moat and the price rocketed, and now LED, Lion's Eye Diamond, has been targeted. As the individual began the buyout, he posted a video telling everyone what he was doing and urging them to get in on the action. This kind of group activity on the few copies that were listed on major retailers caused the price to double overnight. Where the final price ends up is unknown, but it will definitely be higher than it was before. The primary reason why buyouts like these work is because cards on the reserve list, the list of cards Wizards said they will never reprint, are already valuable, short in supply on the open market, and needed for certain formats: Cube, Vintage, Old School, and Legacy. They are very desirable, almost regardless of the price, which will always increase over time without the help of a buyout. These actions just accelerate the process. The split in the community is whether this is an acceptable practice on a luxury good that is based on supply and demand economics, or scummy behavior of a gold digger fleecing the normal Magic folk. One thing is for sure, if you want a reserve list card and it hasn't spiked yet, the sooner you get your hands on it, the better. That's just the way things are as long as the reserve list exists. Linked to this is the reprinting of Donate, a card on the reserve list. Yes, we just said they can't do that. But the card Harmless Offering, featuring potentially the cutest magic art ever, is a functional reprint of Donate, just in another color. This feels very much like a tentative push at the scope of the reserve list, as they previously said that this type of practice was off the table. After all, you can't just print Snow Dual lands. Maybe the cute kitty is a harbinger of things to come.
Yeah, I think it's possible that this adds another weight to the argument to remove the reserve list, with these prices inflating and becoming a barrier to entry to some of the formats that maybe Wizards didn't appreciate was coming so soon. Maybe accelerates plans for the reserve list to be done in.
We move now to some articles from Manaleak.com. First off, we have From the Kitchen Table to Your First FNM, What to Expect from Judges and Other Players by Morgan McGowan. Morgan, a new writer to Manaleak, covers what is for many the biggest leap of faith in their Magic journey, moving from the safety of your home and kitchen table to the FNM arena. Here are some tips he gives for your first FNM. Number 1, don't be afraid to ask questions. 2, don't be afraid to call a judge. 3, listen and learn. 4, don't worry if you do badly. The only way is up. 5, just be yourself and have fun. In the comments, Devin Flagg says, "My biggest fear was when I first walked through the door to see over 70 people total, and all of them way older than I was. But luckily my dad was there to help me when I needed him." Richard James Charles says, "My biggest fear was messing up royally, as my first FNM was actually a Games Day event. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, and bring a sideboard, even if it's just 15 random cards. The people there will help you get better."
Yeah, I think point 4, the don't worry if you do badly, is the thing that I would say is when you turn up to your first competitive Magics and FNMs, just be prepared to lose a lot. And don't be disheartened about it, because everybody, and literally everybody, started from the same place you are now starting from. So the other article we have here is Let's Talk About Negative Stereotypes in Magic the Gathering by Joseph Dunlap. Featured on Channel Fireball's Roundup is the latest article from Joseph that looks at some stereotypes of the Magic players/community. The article takes a measured approach to explore their validity, why they exist, and if necessary, what the community can help to do to dispel them. The article receives some long, well thought out comments from the readers.
Among other comments, I'm just going to say there was a mixed reception of the article. There were people who really appreciated the tone that I was going for, and some people who don't understand what opinion pieces are. I was encouraged by quite a few of the comments that we received.
Yeah, and I think my comment would be stereotypes, whether they are true or not, exist for a reason. And they generally exist because there is some shred of truth, either now or historically, in them, for you to then be able to actually comment on. And interestingly, Jan Nopert said, in regards to the smell, shower and deodorant are usually not the only solution. First off, concentration causes people to sweat, so you will be sweating at a Magic the Gathering event because hopefully you're concentrating. But fresh sweat doesn't smell, so if you took a shower in advance, that's okay. The problem, however, is that sweat tends to find its way into clothes, and then when that gets activated in new sweat, hide your wife and kids. At a certain point, washing your 1999 Metallica on-tour short won't help against the sweat stains. You could try soaking it in vinegar before washing, but I recommend just to buy 5 cheap, basic black or white t-shirts for tournament play. That will last you a year, and if you combine this with showering, I guarantee there will be no more smelling. From the armpits, at least. I think this is possibly the one stereotype that's focused on most by the comments, because Alexander Franklin's Ellis follows up saying, I can't speak for outsiders looking in, but when I was first introduced to Magic the Gathering, I was introduced to a diverse group of fun, sociable people, different genders, attitudes, personal hygiene. But once I started playing releases and FNMs, I did start to run into a certain type of player fairly regularly to develop a stereotype. We don't need to see it happen every other or every third, but just enough. I would say the stereotype that I recognize the most is the one I interact with about 10% of the time. So by no means the average player. I feel bad for the player who gets upset at losing. I'll often 0-2 or 0-3 before my first win. And this is where I meet players in many formats who will become very upset about their losing streak. The player is a deterrent for new players in competitive or semi-competitive leagues especially. This type of player is rare and often only shows this side of them when they do not do well. Win gracefully, lose gracefully, have fun, and learn from your failures.
It's interesting because as I researched for my article, I found a Reddit thread just a few years old where people were describing types of players, and that was yet another definition of a player stereotype. I've seen about 4 in my research. And the interesting thing was somebody pointed out quite poignantly actually in the comments that everyone thinks they're the laid-back player, and they're very, very friendly when things are going great, and then they start to get more and more in their cards and not talk to you when you start beating them.
Yeah. And it does, especially called out here, it only takes the 10% of players to be exhibiting a bad behavior to create a negative stereotype for our game and our community. So don't be part of that 10%. Thanks for listening to 10 Minute Magic. You can find Joseph on Twitter.
Joseph_Dunlap.
And myself at Carburita. We welcome all kind of feedback via the comments threads to the articles that we put out, and on YouTube and via Twitter being the easiest way to directly get in contact with us. This has been 10 Minute Magic, and until next time, bye bye.